Hello, I'm Michael Nava. I'm going to be reading from a section of a new Henry Rios novel called Lies with Men. Set in Los Angeles in 1986, it involves Rios in a campaign to defeat a ballot initiative that would have allowed local health officials to quarantine people with the HIV virus. In this scene, Rios goes to the Los Angeles Gay and Lesbian Community Services Center, where a meeting is being held to plot strategy to defeat the initiative. I turned off Highland into the parking lot of the Gay and Lesbian Community Center and nosed my car into a narrow space. I'd always suspected from its long L shape that in a previous life the center had been a hot sheet motel. Painted industrial gray, it was an unimposing building that was nonetheless constantly being vandalized with graffiti like the one I saw now in red spray paint. AIDS equals anally inserted death serum. In the main community room, a pudgy white-haired man in black-rimmed glasses and a herringbone sports coat banged a gavel on the table at the front, where he and half a dozen other men and women were sitting. All the folding chairs that had been set out in the big space were occupied, and dozens of other people were standing against the walls or sitting on the floor. It was a pretty young crowd. There were lots of black leather jackets, wallet-chained, and hemmed jean shorts, the activist wardrobe. T-shirts were emblazoned with the names of AIDS activist groups or slogans like, "How dare you presume I'm straight?" A dozen or so of the crowd, men and women, wore black T-shirts with a single word written across their chests: queer. I knew one of them, Laura Costa. She taught a gay studies course at a Los Angeles community college. At her invitation, I'd spoken to a couple of her classes about the developments of the law regarding gay rights. Not much to report there. Laura was a self-described butch dyke, her stockiness a product of power weightlifting, her hair gelled and cut into a flat top. She invariably dressed in men's khakis and a Guibera shirt. I caught her eye as the meeting started and nodded. She grinned and mouthed, "Talk later." The white-haired man at the front of the room, an old-school activist, pounded his gavel and declared, "I call this meeting to order." A tall, thin boy in a queer T-shirt jumped to his feet and shouted, "Who the fuck are you to be running things up there? We didn't elect you." The old veteran replied calmly, "I'm not in charge of anything. No decisions are going to be made here this afternoon. This is purely an informational meeting. The people up here have been tracking Proposition 54, and they want to share what they've learned. How the community responds is up to everyone in this room." "But you set up the room like you're the head honcho," the boy shouted back, "like you got the authority." There was a hurried, hushed deliberation among the people at the head table, and then the older man said, "Point taken. Why don't we get rid of the table and form a circle? That way no one's at the head of anything." I groaned. This was precisely the kind of bickering that wasted time and energy better spent in organizing against the quarantine. But like everyone else, I helped rearrange the room, shuffling chairs and bodies until we achieved a semblance of a circle. The older man, who had introduced himself as Morris Knight, again called us to order and introduced the first speaker, a young lawyer named Wendell Thorne. Thorne gave us the background of the initiative, its potential effect, quarantine camps to which people with AIDS would be forcibly removed, the worrying poll numbers, and concluded, "We have 7 months to put together a statewide coalition to defeat the proposition. And I gotta tell you, right now, it's not looking that good." Another panelist, a flame-haired woman who introduced herself as Kate Cassells, broke in, "We're also taking the fight to the courts. We're about to file a lawsuit in the state Supreme Court to try to knock 54 off the ballot because it violates the state's constitutional right to privacy by forcing people to disclose their HIV status." It was a decent argument, but the Supreme Court had an entrenched conservative majority. There was no way those ancient white men were going to side with people they doubtless considered deviants. Proposition 54 would have to be defeated at the ballot or not at all. Knight was saying, "Want to present some possible, and I emphasize possible, strategies to defeat 54. Like Wen said, the Christian right's all over this, but we're not without our allies in the church. Reverend Hester Price from St. George Episcopal has some ideas for mobilizing the Christian left." "Fuck that!" The tall, queer, t-shirted man who disrupted the proceedings earlier was on his feet again. "Who invited her? Christians, they're the enemy. They're all bigots and homophobes." The man sitting in front of me stood up and shouted back, "I'm gay, and I'm a Christian." The tall man strode toward us, got in the second man's face, and screamed, "Then you're an asshole and a traitor." He shoved the man, who slammed me with such force I went over in my flimsy folding chair, smacked the back of my head on the concrete floor, and saw stars. I rolled away from the chair, touched the back of my head, and came away with blood on my fingers. Meanwhile, the meeting had dissolved into screaming voices and flailing arms. A young man's face swam into my line of vision. A moment later, he was kneeling on the floor beside me and saying, "Are you all right? Help me get up." "You're bleeding." "A little, from my head. I need some air." Still dazed, I staggered out of the room and slumped down on the bench outside the building. The young man reappeared, a wad of damp paper towels in his hand. "Let me look at you." I rested my chin on my chest and felt his fingers gently part my hair, then dab my skull with the paper towels. "It's not deep. There's a first aid kit inside. Don't move, I'll be right back." He returned with a metal first aid kit, again parted my hair, applied a stinging antiseptic and a band-aid to the cut. "There," he said. "You're good as new." I smiled. "Are you a doctor?" He smiled back. "Ex-Eagle Scout. My name is Josh." "I'm Henry. Thanks for coming to my rescue." I guessed he was in his early 20s. His hair was a mass of black curls restrained by shiny mousse. He had a delicate bony face, a long nose, a wide strong mouth, and a dimpled chin. It was worth the blow to my head. "You're with the group?" He smiled. "For now, for today anyway, my roommate drafted me." He said. The tall man from Queer stomped out of the center, accompanied by a shorter but more muscular Latino, also in a Queer t-shirt. He regarded me with cool, confiding eyes as if to say, "Can you believe these gringos?" The taller man said to Josh, "Come on, we're leaving." He glared at me. "These people, they're losers." Josh said, he's the roommate I was." "Come on, Josh," he interrupted. "Let's go." "I'm the one with the car," he said apologetically. He took a pen from his pants pocket, lifted my hand, and carefully wrote a telephone number on the back of it. "Call me?" "Yeah." "Promise?" "I promise." He smiled and said, "Okay, talk to you later," and went off with the Queer cohort. At the edge of the parking lot, he turned back, smiled, and waved. Thank you for inviting me to Saints and Sinners. Bye.